Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Greetings and welcome once again to Carmine's Arena, site of conflict and contest, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and the celebration of Western civilization. Yes, I fervently request in each of these programs that we celebrate Western civilization, knowing full well that this construct, which gave us individual freedom, also contains the seeds of its own decadence, decline, and destruction. For man cannot long live with freedom without demanding limitless license. The demand grows ever louder until what results is rebelliousness, usually conducted while wearing face masks, and this masked rebellion leading to nihilism. Nihilism being the rejection of all religious and moral principles which invite standards of behavior and the imposition of judgments. This extreme skepticism defies the necessity of anyone's permission, while ever lusting after everyone's forgiveness. Forgiveness from its many critics, who, as it turns out, were right all along. So you see, the seeds of Western civilization's fall are sown primarily by our secular, progressive leftists, who find historic truisms an inconvenience. For them, truth will ever be stranger than friction, for friction is a lifestyle irritant, which is worn proudly when not routinely assuaged by collective, clannish hand-wringing and promoting of collegial comforts. When you believe in nothing, you are readily equipped to believe in anything. Thus, the leftists' unrelenting belief in the friction and fiction of government, as government for the left is a substitute for God, parenthood, and personal responsibility. We shall return to non-believers. Meanwhile, let us posit some other examples which clarify my arguments against leftish pose and positions, their permanent adolescence, their passion for failure, their propensity toward lunacy. Just think of the recent appointment of Justice Sotomayor to the highest and heretofore the most respected tribunal in the Western world, the United States Supreme Court. Here is the lady's very own comment, and I quote, "I would hope that a wise Latina woman, with the richness of her experiences, would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life," unquote. I could spend a Harvard Law School semester or two dedicated to parsing from the lectern using audiovisual aids her statement's many profoundly ludicrous declarations. Suffice it to say here that it becomes sparklingly clear that new discrimination is far superior to the old, which forgets that a judgeship cresting an elevated thought becomes the product of knowing the self firmly enough to aspire to reach beyond personal bias and personal characterization and beyond personal agenda. Allow me to hasten to make clear that quite naturally we all have our prejudices. Anyone denying this human foible ends by possessing the biggest prejudice of them all: self-righteous pomposity. And from such like, whether a judge or a jerk, shall emanate poor decision and total loss of a sense of occasion. One's sex, race, and ethnicity ought never to inform nor affect the decisions rendered from the bench. In this scenario, the law would indeed have moved from being an ass to morphing into a venomous snake. Under these circumstances, we won't even get a last hurrah, nor even a whimper. We'll hear a tail rattle, awakening our long sleep. Further examples of Western decline is secular progressive atheism on parade. Yes, I know, I digress and am in danger of sounding repetitious, but while I was talking to you about our decadence and decline, I was reminded of this observation made years ago by Martin Luther King Jr. He stated, "Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men." I've an addendum to Dr. King's profound observation, and that is that guided missiles are meant to cause destruction, yet misguided men all too often want to do the right thing, but they do the right thing in the wrong way, which ends in even greater destruction. The destruction not only of people, but the spirit of their culture, values, and traditions. A culture diluted by ditzy diversity and headlong flights into the fog of globalism and its undiscriminating choices and penchant for mischief and misdirection. Atheists, while attempting to purify our thinking, don't even possess the simple capacity to at least remain God's loyal opposition. They would sweep away the remnants of myth from the world, while on their very doorsteps they walk across rubble daily, promising to attend to the debris they ironically pray will be cleaned up by sanitation or possibly Santa Claus. What is that debris, you may well ask? It is the consequence of the misguided repairing of what wasn't broken, breaking it and not knowing how to put Humpty Dumpty together again. That's a lot of eggshell, and that is a lot of egg on their collective faces. But when you've lost faith and face, you lose the so-called myth and imagination which fuel intuition. For the faithful are given to intuit what would otherwise seal us off from the extrapolation of our mystery, our magic, its miracles, and the joyous liberation of awe. Yes, awe. With all the interior and exterior mysteries that surround and encompass us, atheists doggedly devolve into lonely egotists and worse, egoists who hang together to warm the draught they beget from standing proudly in the cold outside of history, custom, and the cosmic pulse. Having exiled themselves, they long now to excommunicate resistance, calling their ambitions, I should say, legal, lawful, and freed of human bias. Theirs is the covert impeachment of joy and the imprisonment of our better angels. Since freedom, genuine freedom, is a quantity shorn of ideological license because freedom is inspired and nurtured by moral codes, not the enactments of men who cynically depart from them. Excuse me. Atheists protective of their secular feelings, those so hurt feelings, ironically endeavor to cast aspersion upon the feelings of the faithful at the some cost of declaring God dead and themselves alive. And as we see alive and joyless, become joy killers who replace bliss with smug blather, who replace God with government, beauty with bureaucracy. In short, atheism is self-imposed misery hunting for company. Believers, even when silent, make them jittery and lonely, so they end up shaking their bony fists from below our stained glass windows. Should they prevail, it will be Western civilization's last hurrah, and they will have succeeded in not only vexing mystery, magic, and miracle, but ultimately vexing their own mischief, realized in the masochistic massacre of their very own souls. I thank God not only for his love, his mercy, but his sense of mirth. Who otherwise could gently mock non-believers by lavishing man with the many gifts of beauty and the many geniuses who have been granted the divine gift of recreating beauty? Recently I attended a concert at which Juilliard String Quartet graced us with a performance of Beethoven's two last string works, Opus 131 in C-sharp minor and Opus 132 in A minor. In these last period masterpieces, Beethoven's poetic expressiveness achieved a peace and radiance not found anywhere else among the great works. This new path taken at the close of his life, of any life in fact, is miraculous. This peace I speak of is of a peace we can never know. It belongs to a state of consciousness surpassing our own, where our problems do not exist, and to which our highest aspirations provide no key. Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, said in another novel entitled Point, Counterpoint, said of Beethoven's last string quartet, Opus 132, "It's the most perfect spiritual abstraction from reality I've known. It was as though heaven had suddenly and impossibly become more heavenly, has passed from achieved perfection into perfection yet deeper and more absolute. It belongs to a peace not of passivity, but quivering, a peace that is alive. It seems to grow and intensify itself. It becomes an active calm, an almost passionate serenity. The miraculous paradox of eternal life and eternal repose was musically realized," unquote. And I should like to add that Opus 132 is wisdom's resignation, in which surrender begets its very own victory. Thus we have this deathless insight from a man of faith and genius, God's reward too often given to a thankless humanity. You atheists out there, take heed, for what shall you replace Western civilization with? What will your Beethoven sound? For in the absence of God, the rest is noise. For in the absence of God, will it be women in combat, exalted by gangster rap, BS artists produce? Will it be an entitlement society that underwrites single motherhood, fatherless children? Will it be failed politicians who nonetheless are re-elected by a coddled, degenerate electorate? Speaking of which, excuse me, on November 6th, 2012, Jesse Jackson Jr. resigned from Congress after running an absentee campaign, winning 63% of the vote in his Democratic-leaning district, though, as I said, he had held no campaign appearances for months and was undergoing treatment at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota on Election Day. Meanwhile, he's been under investigation, a looming inquiry into Mr. Jackson's use of campaign funds, and questions about attempts to buy Obama's vacated Senate seat. Meanwhile, by law, a new and expensive election has to be called within 115 days. And get this, Jackson's seat will possibly be filled by his wife Sandy or Mr. Jackson's brother, Jonathan. Sounds like North Korea's 3 generations of Kims. You know that dynasty that is people-oriented. Chicago politics, of course, of questionable benevolence, is unquestionable tyranny. And now we have a Chicago-style president who wishes to transform America to what, we may ask? He has spent more money in one term than all past presidents lumped together. That's some lump. Now, his answer is to tax us back to prosperity. This is well to remember Churchill's words, and I quote, "For a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handles." He also said, "Those who are not liberal before the age of 40 have no heart, and those who remain liberal after the age of 40 have no brain." Small wonder that President Obama returned to our long-standing ally, Great Britain, a bronze bust of Churchill given years ago as a gift to the White House. Can you imagine that? Perhaps our president forgets that the great Sir Winston had a very beautiful and rich American mother. Then again, Mr. Obama may have remembered and despaired of not being able to levy a death tax on the dear lady. Lest we forget, secular progressive leftist socialism has and remains a failed philosophy spawned by Marx, who, being less than honorable gentleman, designed a construct which better corrals herds and collectives rather than a construct which can accommodate human nature. A nature which craves free enterprise, self-reliance, and small government, and embraces competition incentivized by the expectation of success. Marx was a faithless husband, a womanizer, a high liver off of his rich friend Engels' largesse. Engels, who, to save Marx's reputation, get this, declared himself the father of Marx's illegitimate son, a son he abandoned while falling in love with the human race. Yes, socialism remains a failure, I should say, as it plods along in Europe today. And yesterday in Stalin's USSR, Mao's China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, on and on unto the likes of the aforementioned North Korea. Not a pretty picture. If it is to happen here in America, surely Western civilization will have heard its last hurrah. Yet, I'm the eternal optimist, nurtured by the truth inherent in beauty. And so, and so I'll recognize our misguided electorate, understanding it as one of those historic blips on the screen of human error and its unfathomable longing to vex itself. For lo and behold, Cuba is now adopting the logic of competition and capitalism. Its sputtering state-run economy has become a tired joke. Fidel's brother Raul Castro was notoriously the revolution's most loyal communist. Excuse me while I take a little water. He's a communist. Now, however, Raul, as the country's president, becomes a man who boosts and boasts the free market and its reforms. The mentality is changing. It's on its way to curing decades-old insanities. This must perplex and frustrate the cadre of leftist thinkers like Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, and leftists who, after the age of 40, should have found a brain, such as those Fidel Castro lovers, the likes of Harry Belafonte and Sean Penn, and that host of closet capitalist celebrities who reside in La La Land, the perfect analogy for leftist thinkers and or politicians is that their rhetoric is comparable to high fructose corn syrup, empty of nutrition, excessive of calories, but sweet, 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 productive of fat-headed opinions and diabetic vision. At no time has America, the last bastion of Western civilization, and America's exceptionalism been more vividly witnessed than in its absence. One can imagine that its absence is not its disappearance, but America's exceptionalism shall be revivified in the dawn of a renewed understanding and re-energized longing for God, family, and a hearty, home-cooked meal shared with kith and kin. It truly is easy to be human, and not the deconstructed product of academia and the gutter. For both avenues anesthetize shame and guilt and remodel us into gullible goofs. Self-deception is a nasty, addictive drug. I'm reminded of the tongue-in-cheek anecdote of the rabbi approached by a congregant who asked if it was permissible to take a plane trip on the Sabbath. After much pondering, the rabbi said, "Yes, provided you remain strapped in your seat for the entire flight, in which instance you would not be riding, but wearing the plane." Now this is comedy as remedy to self-deceit. But what does one do with the following? My research revealed an interesting breach in Islamic practice. I'm not making this up. Believe me, Islamic males may do as they like on Mondays and Thursdays because those days are reserved by Allah to reckon up the sins of His followers. Therefore, Allah will be too busy to notice. As a result, we have the Thursday Club, where and when Muslim men engage in all sorts of kinky behavior, too scandalous to describe even were I on HBO. Now, if you can fool the deity, mind you, with such impunity, what chance do we poor infidels have? Beware, beware, for Americans share a weakness. You see, we are impatient. We ask, how much longer do we have to stay in Iraq? How much longer do we have to stay in Afghanistan? Are we there yet? My answer is the only definitive answer, the only possible answer, the only realistic answer. We stay there for as long as it takes to achieve not Muslim love, but achieve and guarantee Muslim respect. Thus, we must learn the age-old caution to make haste slowly. In Latin, festina lente, make haste slowly. In making haste slowly, in restoring the American dream, not the Greek, Spanish, Italian, and French nightmare, we shall then have many hurrahs, the most hearty and irrepressible shouts of hurrah from old enemies and new admirers, even what's left of the left. And my friends, let us hold on to Western civilization. Let us steel ourselves against nihilism and its caprices. And until next time, make yourself a promise. Please do keep the faith.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.